afternoon, good evening, good morning, AP Euro students. Listen to the music. Music is a reflection of art. Art is a reflection of what is going on in society today. So we need to consider this so we don't get confused about art. You know, you learn about all these political names, you learn about all these wars. All those affect how people think, how they behave. And in this case, it's the same thing. So again, we need to recap what were the most important issues of the day and age that we're covering here. In this case, the 16th through really the beginning of the 19th century. And if we do that, I think you'll have a better understanding of what the textbook is saying in regards to art. So, again, I want to clear up some things. There seems to be some confusion in class about art. I don't want you guys to be intimidated by art. In reality, I want you to kind of embrace it because it is kind of neat when you think about that it is a reflection of what's going on at the time and in society. So I really want to clear this up before we go down the wrong path and all of you that are confused end up in some kind of van down by the river. So, let's use the buzz terms, people. I like to rattle them off in class. We need to be able to synthesize. We need to contextualize. We need to recognize periodization here. All right? So let's have a starting point. Let's go back before Rococo. Let's go back before Neoclassical. Let's go back before chapter 17, 18, 16. Let's go back to chapter 15 with the Baroque. All right? And, the Baroque needs to be associated with two important eras, events that are going on at this particular time in the 17th century. And that would certainly be the Age of Absolutism, Louis XIV and the boys, and of course the Catholic Counter-Reformation. So, again, we need to know first, how did Baroque art reflect the Age of Absolutism? And we got to look at the characteristics, no doubt about it. They reflect what's going on at that time. And the whole goal of Baroque art is to overwhelm the viewer, emphasize grandeur, emotion, movement, spaciousness, and unity surrounding certain theme. You're like, what is he talking about? Guys, all you need to do is look at the pictures on this slide. It's Versailles. Versailles is Baroque. You know what I'm saying. It is Baroque art. It's not broke in. All over the place, huge frescoes, unified around the emotional impact of a single theme. And what is the single theme? It is, ladies and gentlemen, the Sun King. It's all about Louis XIV and the Bourbons. All right? The reason, the purpose of this is to overwhelm the people that are that go to Versailles at that particular time. And it is. I've never been there, but I still hear. I see pictures. It is overwhelming, and it's to drum up support and fascinate people with the theory of absolutism and how powerful someone like Louis XIV must be to have something so sweet. From the nobility factor, how cool is it for me to be a noble, to be invited to Versailles, where Louis invited me as his personal guest, where I get to live a superficial, materialistic, empty life without any type of political power. Yay me. But, that is what Versailles was all about, and that's what Baroque was about, grandeur. It's about intense, like I said, emotion, and it really is glorifying, in this case, Louis XIV, and it's going to be borrowed into Austria. It's going to be borrowed into other places as well, as different rulers are trying to mimic what Louis achieved in Versailles. Okay? Now, as stated earlier, we got to also give a shout out to the Catholic Counter-Reformation, because if you think about it, religious turmoil in the 17th century. We're talking about 30 Years' War. Talk about after the War of the League of Augsburg, after Luther. Obviously, we know that religion is making things an awful big mess. So with the Baroque art in the Catholic nations, it really did. It began to be associated with the Counter-Reformation countries. And its goal was to teach in a concrete and emotional way and demonstrate the glory, just like it was the glory of Louis XIV. Here it's the glory and power of the almighty Catholic Church. This is kind of the church's last stand as the only show in town. And they want to drum up support You guys know that a lot of people were, if you were Catholic, the Jesuits are big, and so in this case, people do feel like their backs to the wall, and they feel like they do need to do something to kind of get things back to the way they used to be. So Baroque is associated with the Catholic Counter-Reformation. All right, who encourages it? Of course, it's the papacy and the Jesuits, and it's really prominent if you think about it, because a lot of times absolutism is tied to the church, and in many cases the Catholic Church, like the Gallican Church in Louis XIV's France. So it's typical and prominent in France, Flanders, which again we've talked about the situation in Flanders, Austria with the Habsburgs, trying to retain their power in the fading Holy Roman Empire. It's also prominent in Germany and Poland, which are predominantly Catholic areas. Later on, it'll spread to countries such as the Netherlands and northern Germany and England, which those places tend to be, as I said, Protestant. So it's when you talk about art, when you talk about music. I mean, let's talk about pop music for a second. The king of pop. You can't talk about pop music without talking about Elvis, without talking about the Beatles, and that's way before my time. So Michael Jackson, the king of pop. So who are the giants of Baroque art? And first we need to talk about Bernini, who really typifies Baroque architecture and sculpture. He did work for St. Peter's, after Michelangelo, the colonnade for the piazza in front of St. Peter's. He designed it. He has a lot of sculptures, pieces of sculpture in places like Versailles. I mean, everybody, including the church, including Louis XIV, wanted a piece of this guy and wanted a piece of this guy's art. So, one of the ones that you saw in your book was another one of the more prominent examples of Bernini. It was his altarpiece sculpture. It was the Ecstasy of St. Teresa. And there's powerful emotion here, as if you read up on this, an angel is really like stabbing her in the heart. It's about her mystical experience, and again, it's a fascinating piece of work. But the detail, the power, the emotion of what's transpiring here is what really Bernini is all about, and why this is Baroque. Now, the picture here that you saw earlier, we kind of took a trace of Donatello's more boyish David, which he sculpted for the Medici. We learned a little bit about Michelangelo's David, and contrapposto and the stance there, and it's really a great example of humanism. Well, this is an example of Bernini's version of David, and again, power, emotion. This version of David by Bernini shows movement, it's like right after he hurls the stone that is going to fall, Goliath the giant, and you can kind of see the seriousness, the intenseness on his face, and really, if you think about it, the power of the moment. So this is why Bernini is a great example to look at in terms of art. And again, as I said, Versailles was built during the reign of Louis XIV, the quintessential Baroque structure. Well, Habsburg Emperor Leopold I built Schönbrunn in response to kind of say, hey, Louis, we're pretty sweet over here, us Habsburgs. It's not all about you Bourbons. And then also, Peter the Great in Russia built Peterhof, largely on the influence of Versailles and what he saw on his great trip west. And his daughter Catherine built the other thing seen here, if you look in the lower right, the Winter Palace in St. Petersburg, which was one of the most glorious examples of Baroque architecture in Russia. So again, celebrating the power and influence of the monarch symbolizes the importance of absolutism of the day, and that's one of the reasons why Baroque is associated with absolutism, and as I said, of course, the Counter-Reformation. So I hope that one helped a little bit. So if it ain't Baroque, don't fix it unless everything changes. And you know what? Baroque did change. If you think about the 17th century, it was Baroquean. And so it led to some new artistic styles of the day. And this is where I'm going to just review with you Rococo art and Neoclassical, because the times were changing, and these two versions of art are a reflection of that. So Rococo. Let's talk about the visual arts in Rococo. A couple things you want to identify with it. You want to identify with the court of Louis XV, who you'll be reading about in chapter 18. If you look at some of the paintings in your book and a couple of the ones that I'm going to show you, you'll notice a little bit of a difference between the Baroque and the Rococo. There are lighter elements and more curves and natural patterns than a lot of the heavier Baroque style paintings. It's highly ornate. It's highly decorative. That's actually a similarity between Rococo and Baroque. But there's more intimate settings. It's less about grandeur in the Baroque, all right? And a lot of these works will resemble or focus on the playful scenes of the aristocracy and the wealthy, including the new and wealthy bourgeoisie. One of those people that we need to kind of associate with the Rococo art is Antoine Watteau. And he's one of the really considered the first great Rococo painter of the era. And this one is actually a picture in your book, but this is the Pilgrimage to Cythera. And, it portrays aristocratic life here in a world of elegance. And, in this painting, he depicts a group of aristocratic lovers, which is kind of risque, huh? About to depart from Cythera, which I'm probably botching the pronunciation of the island, but anyway, it's there that they paid homage to Venus, the goddess of love. And, they're really luxurious dressed. It kind of shows you what was appropriate for the aristocracy back then. And they move from the woodlands to a golden barge that's waiting them. It's kind of interesting if you go in your book and you look here, there's little cupids flying around to kind of notice that this is about love and good feelings. In the next example, after Watteau, we talk about Jean Fragonard and the Swing in 1767. And if you look at this painting, again, you can kind of see the lighter elements. There's a lot of curves, natural patterns. The intimate setting here is, it's about again, the aristocracy, potentially two lovers here, swinging, flirting going on. Actually, that guy's kind of copping a view, which is kind of creepy. But, this is what I mean by it's not about Baroque. The other thing that, we want to make sure that we understand in terms of Rococo is that it's more secular. There's nothing religious about this. Her shoes flying out. She's got her feet up in the air, her dress is up in the air, she's kicking. So again, just a playful scene at that. So again, to recap, you see these paintings, they're still very highly decorative, there's no doubt about it, but they're rejecting the strict geometrical patterns of the Baroque. It's more secular, as I said. There's more intimate settings. And, they're more secular in the sense of religion was not the main theme. And people really at this particular era also began to challenge the legitimacy of absolute governments and monarchs. And, I think that's one of the things that why the attention was less about the absolute kings, less about the absolute monarchs and the church. And they focused on, as I said, the aristocracy and the bourgeoisie, who were starting to contemplate their irrelevance in society at the expense of those absolute authorities. Now, the neoclassical, some of you guys were wondering about this, and with the neoclassicism, it really continues from the 17th century and into the 18th century. Terrible typing skills here. And actually, it's going to go into the 19th century. I'll explain that here shortly. So, from a time frame standpoint, we kind of need to know that. And, it really is. It's a couple things influence this, but the dignity and the simplicity, I guess I should say, of the classical style of ancient Greece and ancient Rome are back, okay, in terms of the characteristics. Let's think about this for a second. Let me just write that in. Focus is back on Greece and Rome. Why? Why did they want to return to the artistic style of ancient Rome and the Greek ideals and the Renaissance, where there's simplicity, balance, and symmetry? Well, let's think about this. After the 30 Years' War and the beginning of the scientific revolution, many people wanted to turn the attention to more secular themes. we know that even during the Renaissance, people loved celebrating the Greeks and the Romans and their contributions to Western civilization. The Baroque focused on the power of the church and absolute monarchs. Many re-celebrated the dignity and the simplicity of the ancient Greeks and the ancient Romans. There's just like anything, like art, sometimes it gets too crazy. And so there's a backlash and there's a change. People are like, you know what, that's a little crazy. Let's go back to the way it used to be. So you see a little bit of this with neoclassical. And coincidentally, a lot of you are probably thinking, wouldn't this go against what we learned? Wouldn't they be against Greece and Rome, since many of the scientists were finding out that Aristotle and Ptolemy were wrong in so many theories? It's actually the contrary. First of all, we know that those older figures of science were still revered and loved. Even though some of their ideas were being proven wrong, we know that even Copernicus was really afraid to kind of diss Aristotle. So you get that out of your head, really. And I think really what you want to think of is, let's think politically. We're talking about people questioning absolutism here and leading into the Enlightenment. So, Greece was democratic, and many of the Enlightened philosophers were actually fascinated by this, and were starting to read a lot of the original text to come up with their own ideas, which were shaping Enlightenment views on how to make absolute Europe run better and more efficiently. So again, art is a reflection of society, so I think you need to kind of keep that in mind when you look at neoclassical architecture and neoclassical art. Okay, so just like, we talked about Watteau being a giant in Rococo, Bernini being a giant among others, believe me, there's more, in the Baroque, let's make sure we give a shout out to Jacques-Louis David. Okay, he's the most important artist of this particular movement. So I want to kind of take a second here to look at one of his famous paintings. I apologize, the image isn't very good here on the slide here, but this is the Death of Socrates, and it's probably the first major work of the neoclassical era. So it's kind of interesting, of how this still glamorizes and glorifies Greece. So, in this case, the story of the execution of Socrates was told by Plato. And in this story, Socrates has been convicting of corrupting the youth of Athens and introducing strange gods. And honestly, when you read into this, the Socratic seminar and what was really dangerous about Socrates to a lot of the powers that be in Athens was that he was kind of obviously had a big following, but he was teaching his pupils, his students, to question everything. Authority and science, and we're talking about the scientific method and the Enlightenment and the scientific revolution. So you kind of see how people were really fascinated with Socrates here, and so he was sentenced to die by drinking poison hemlock. And Socrates, rather than fleeing and running when the opportunity arises, and he can do that, he uses his death as the final lesson for his pupils and faces it calmly and nobly. In the painting, an old white man is in the back. He's in the white robe, and obviously he's there. He sits up on a bed, one hand extended over a cup, and the other gesturing in the air as he's like still teaching his students. And he's surrounded by other men of varying ages. A lot of them are emotionally distressed, unlike the stoic old man. And the young man handing him the cup looks away. I can't even look. His face free, with his face in his free hand, kind of hiding, embarrassed, and doesn't want to really do it. Another young man clutches the thigh of an old man. An elderly man sits at the end of the bed, slumped over, looking in his lap, just disgusted. And to the left of the painting, the wall becomes an arch with more men in the background. So, when you look at this, as I said, he's killed by politicians who thought he was corrupting the youth of Athens by urging him to challenge authority. And once you understand that, I think you can kind of get a feel for what the neoclassical art was all about and how it really is a reflection of 18th century society with all that's changing and being questioned with the Enlightenment. He also later on will produce numerous works glorifying the French Revolution, and after 1800 he develops kind of an empire, what they call an empire style that glorified Napoleon's regime. He became Napoleon's official court painter after the coronation of 1804. And let's face it, you got to follow where the money is. That's never changed. And I guess I want to give a shout out to neoclassical architecture. And a lot of the public buildings that were built during this time period are reflective of the neoclassical style. A lot of public buildings, you know, the arches, the columns, in terms of the pillars, you know, kind of glamorizing ancient Greece. And, you know, here's the deal. What are these pictures of? This is the United States of America. Our capital was founded during the early part of the 19th century, and it's still a spillover from what the experiment was, the great experiment of our Constitutional Convention, which are, you know, really the ideals. It's a culmination of the ideals of the Enlightenment. And, you know, you better believe that ancient Greece and Rome as republics and democracies were a big part of why our nation's capital is designed the way it is. Thomas Jefferson, if you guys are looking at colleges, he lived at Monticello. It's neoclassical. I mean, he's a child of the Enlightenment. And in fact, if you look at the University of Virginia, boys and girls, who designed that? Thomas Jefferson. Pillars all over the place. So hopefully, you know, that makes some sense over neoclassical and Rococo and how they're a reflection of the changing time. So, you know, the neoclassical ideas and the visual arts influence music as well. Music's also a reflection of the time of balance, symmetry, and restraint. So we want to associate Mozart, Haydn, and Beethoven with becoming the masters of this new style. And they moved away from the dense Baroque textures of Johann Sebastian Bach and Handel the Messiah. You know, you think about, I apologize, I can't get my music to work right now. I don't know what's going on with my sound, but you know, if you go in and at the best of Bach and some of the powerful melodies and really emotional, or think of like the Hallelujah chorus and the Messiah. So, you know, those are powerful. You can associate those with the Baroque. And when you listen to Mozart, when you listen to Beethoven, some of this classical music, it's more chilled. And I don't know how else to say it. It's simple, tuneful melodies, clear forms. And this is where the symphony develops as an important genre. So I hope that helped. Shout out to Dana. Thanks for asking that question, because I know a lot of people were feeling the same way, not really prepared. And so this helps me help you guys, if you listened. So I'd usually I'd leave you with some closing music. But as I said, I'm having technical difficulties. All right, take care and dominate the Euro exam.